Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. As you've probably heard, this year we're saying goodbye to Hattons, who I think I would say were my favourite of the model railway retailers. But Hattons were also a manufacturer and they brought us quite an eclectic mix of different models over the years. So in this video I'm going to take a look back at some of those. In the early days, Hattons would commission existing manufacturers like Oxford Rail, DJM and Helgen to produce exclusive models for them. And I think it's fair to say the results here were quite mixed. We had models like the Oxford Rail ICI hoppers, which were just incredible, very impressive models. And then there were models like the Helgen LNER coaches in O-scale, which in typical Helgen fashion were so poor in quality that Hattons actually had to grade the coaches according to the condition they were in, brand new coaches mind you, and the poorer ones had to be sold off at a discount because they were so hopeless. But to an extent, the success of those early models was more or less down to the manufacturer that produced them. Later on though, Hatton started to produce models by themselves. They went directly to China and they did much of the development by themselves, and it's these models that I consider, at least, to be the true Hatton's Originals models. So let's jump into some of those. First of all, we have possibly my favourite, and it is this. The Hatton's SECR P-Class, a pre-grouping tank engine, and I maintain that these are the best running tank engines ever produced. Can't think of any that are better. The SECR P-Class was designed by Harry Wainwright and it was introduced in 1909. The class was a rather underpowered design which produced less than 3/4 of the tractive effort of the Terriers that they were inspired by. As a result, the P-Class that was intended for lightweight passenger trains ended up doing shunting and other lighter duties. And also only 8 examples were ever produced, in stark contrast with the Terriers, of which 50 were built. Despite their underwhelming performance, 4 examples have managed to survive into preservation, meaning that half of the entire class still survives today. And there's a lot to love about these P-Class locos, but I think for me the most impressive aspect of them was the liveries. Obviously there was a lot to choose from in terms of livery, but this one always stood out to me, the SECR green one. Now I can't remember whether it was this loco that was the first in 00 scale ready to run to have the SECR green livery. It was either this or the Hornby H class, they both kind of came out around the same time. But either way, it was one of the first locos in 00 to have that livery, and that's significant because of how insanely complicated it is. There is so much lining, there are so many different colours, and yet they achieved this result incredibly well. So look at the wheels even, 3 different colours on the wheels to my count, incredible. You've got the brassy finish on the dome and the safety valves, incredible lining across the tanks where the lettering and crest are as well. For a tiny loco, it's just insane how complex this is. A genuinely very beautiful model and put together to the highest of standards as well. And the livery and the detail, all of this stuff is incredible, that's for sure, but it's not even the best aspect of this model. The best aspect is performance, and I'll show you this running in just a second. But we need something to run with the P-Class, and in fact that's what everybody in the industry was saying. And so Hattons responded with this. Now this is a single coach, but it represents a whole range of hundreds, probably hundreds, of different coaches known as the Hattons Genesis coaches. And these were a generic set of coaches which were inspired by the early coaches of the pre-grouping era, and because they were generic, Hattons could paint them into so many different liveries, which they did, and give us modelers something to run with those pre-grouping locos, of which there are loads and loads. And this idea was so fantastic that within just a couple of months of Hattons announcing this range, we happened to know that Hornby went off and measured some early coaches like this in order to hurry to get their range of similar coaches produced. And Hornby got their models to the market first, that is true, but despite being the massive model making giant that Hornby is, their early 4 and 6 wheel coaches came nowhere close to Hatton's in terms of the quality, the detail and the liveries. which is a real testament to the talent that those people at Hatton's had. So this is one of the SECR liveried Genesis coaches, and that's necessary to run with the P-Class, of course. But there were tons of different liveries of these coaches, and they were all the same in terms of detail. And they were incredibly inexpensive, less than £30 I believe when I bought these, and yet the level of detail is just amazing. So let me give you the whistle-stop tour. Roof furniture, all of this separately fitted. The seating inside is nicely moulded, and there are even etched luggage racks inside. All of the door handles are separately fitted, and we've got full underframe detail. And that's not to mention all of the handrails and separately fitted steps on the end. Very, very detailed models, quite inexpensively priced as well. And more importantly, these filled a massive gap in the collections of so many modelers who just wanted something relatively prototypical looking to run with those pre-grouping locos. And thanks to Hatton's and these Genesis coaches, we can all do that now in style. So let's do that now in style. So there it goes, possibly my best running tank engine. Really, really incredible. And if you want to see what it's capable of, do check out my review on the Hatton's P-Class. I'll post a link in the top right. But a fantastic performer, and the Genesis coaches, all four of my SECR ones there, coupled up and running beautifully. And the size of the Genesis coach project is unbelievable, because within each livery that Hatton's produced, and there were loads of those, I don't know how many, but within each livery there are so many different variations. You got the first class, you got the third class, there's the lavatory, there's the full brake for the six-wheeler, a brake for the four-wheeler, probably some that I'm forgetting as well. And then within those variations there are different roof furnitures for the different periods. You've got gas, oil and electric lighting. Yeah, really quite awesome. And again, if you're interested in the Genesis coaches, do check out my review on those. There is a new batch of these still on the way, as far as I know. So hopefully we'll still get to see more of those. But there you have it, the beautiful, beautiful P-Class with a big train of SECR coaches. At around the same time as the P-Class, Hatton's produced another early steam locomotive, and it was similarly successful. And that, of course, was this, the Andrew Barclay, an 040 tank engine this time, and an industrial one at that, which allowed them to produce these in quite a few different interesting liveries, as you can see here. And like the P-Class did, these ABs blew some of the other manufacturers out of the water. The build quality and the running qualities of these models, again at the time, were second to none, and I remember being quite amazed by them. Andrew Barclay Sons and Company was founded in 1892, and they became known for producing their range of saddle tank engines, which were customizable in order to suit the needs of the customer. Barclay engines were built to meet different needs to the locomotives of the larger railways. These, for example, had to be able to handle tight curves and point work, which were common on the various marshalling yards and exchange sidings where these would be working. In real life, many of the Barclay engines outlived the end of the steam era in the 1960s, and that was because many of them were privately owned, and their owners were quite happy to keep them on working in their various industries. And everything I said about the P-Class pretty much applies to this model as well. It was produced at roughly the same time as the P-Class, and the paintwork and decoration is all just as good. This is the preserved era Caledonian livery, and as you can see, the finish and the quality of the paint is just wonderful on this. It's also got some awesome detailing though. I mean, look at the pipework, the springs above the chassis, tiny little safety valve assembly, so detailed on this. And the Hatton's model had quite a few different variations to it as well. I mean, one of the most noticeable ones would be the different buffer sizes, but there was a lot more than just that. Yeah, incredible looking model. I mean, look at the cab. The cab is just wonderful on this thing. And again, the price of these was so reasonable, just £99. And in fact, on the newest batch that Hatton's announced of these, they were going to be much less than £99. At the time of filming, I don't know whether that's still going ahead, but I hope it does, because these are wonderful. Anyway, that's a close look at the AB. Let's move on. So we need something to run with the Andrew Barclay, and that brings us on to our next Hatton's original piece of rolling stock. and that was the legendary Warwell wagon, which Hatton's produced in 00 scale, and there was a number of different variants in 00, but they also produced the Warwell in O gauge, which was even more impressive. And in true Hatton's form, the quality of these models was just insane. Both of them are fully metal in their construction, so all of these frames that you can see are solid metal, and they weigh an awful lot as a result, particularly this O gauge one. And the Warwells have quite an interesting history as well. They were actually built for the transportation of tanks in the Second World War. Introduced in 1942, they were necessary because the existing rolling stock was not sufficiently large so as to accommodate them. Following the end of the war, they were maintained and reused for other purposes, and the military continued to use the Warwells too for the transportation of various equipment. Over time, they have been modified to meet more modern standards, but surprisingly, the essential design remains pretty much the same. And it's models like this that really made me love Hatton's, because at the time this was released, other manufacturers were talking about how the high prices were necessary, and yet precious few of the other manufacturers were producing models as high quality as this, i.e. fully die-cast and super heavy. And yet here was this model from Hatton's, super high quality, really heavy, excellently built, and also very reasonably priced. And the features this packed were just unbelievable. Look, it's even got sprung buffers. And so it was really refreshing to see Hatton's produce something like this and show that low quality and high priced products were not actually as necessary as some of the other manufacturers suggested. So for that reason, I will always love these Warwells. And again, the new batch that Hatton's announced was even cheaper than the original run. So Hatton's were still doing the same thing right up until the end. So let's hook these up to the Andrew Barclay and let's give them a run. So there she is, the beautiful Andrew Barclay, and to show off what this can do, I've got it running nice and slowly for you. And it's hauling the Warwells, as you can see. And I'm desperately hoping that we will see some of these models again in the future. At the time of filming, they're still deciding the fate of the Andrew Barclay, so hopefully there's at least a chance that a new batch with those new liveries is still on the way. And that's really something to look forward to, if so. But if not, either way, we've still got the ones that Hatton's did make, and as you can see, the performance here is just wonderful. The crawl that these models can do is just out of this world, and it's been a little while now since I reviewed one of the Andrew Barclays, but I do have full reviews for both of the Andrew Barclays that I've got, so if you want to learn more about them, I'll pop a link up in the top right. But as you can see, all working perfectly, no issues with the couplings or the Warwells running. Yeah, just always a dream to run this stuff. And I know that I'll always keep these and I'll always run them. Hatton's also became known for producing some more unusual models. Models of prototypes that have never been seen before in 00 scale. And a cracking example of that would be this, the Beilhack snowplow. And they produced quite a few different Beilhacks in a couple of different liveries, but this one was always my favourite because of the Stratford shark face that was painted onto this thing. And it's things like this that can make a piece of rolling stock fascinating to me. I think some of the more nondescript rolling stock, I can take it or leave it, but when I saw that Hatton's were producing these, I was immediately interested. I wanted to find out more about them, and more importantly, I guess for Hatton's, I wanted to buy some of them. And the Beilhack snowplow blades first arrived in the UK during the 1980s from Germany. However, the blades proved to be far too heavy and inconvenient to be mounted to the buffer beams of several British diesels of the era. To solve this problem, disused bogies from withdrawn Class 40s and Class 45s were salvaged, modified, and then repurposed to permanently hold the snowplow blades. This solution proved to be both convenient and cost-effective, and it meant that the snowplows were now discrete vehicles. The units are still in use to this day, and the Beilhack known as the Stratford Shark obviously got its name from the large shark face which was painted onto the plough. This was a completely unofficial modification made by the staff at the loco depot, but it has since become quite a celebrity. So here it is, the most famous of the Beilhack snowplows, the Stratford Shark with the terrifying face on the front. And for me, this brings back a lot of memories. It brings back memories of Wally, was it 2018, where Hatton's actually brought the real thing to the exhibition and we all had pictures in front of it, so that was amazing. It also inspired me to use this as a villain in one of my Christmas specials, and I remember that was a lot of fun. It was Benson the Beilhack. He was blocking the line, and he did not look happy. And like all of the Hatton's models, quality was really the order of the day here. So we've got basically all metal construction, and there's tons of detail across the side, as you can see, both separately fitted and painted. Looks really, really impressive. And the plough itself and the internal structure of it is all faithfully recreated on the model, which looks fantastic. So there you have it, the Stratford Shark, the most famous snowplough in the world of railways. So the ploughs are approaching, and I'm keeping them very steady because they wouldn't go fast in real life. And this is pretty much the formation that they would run in. The Class 20s, I believe, did push or pull these Beilhacks, although I think they did it in pairs. I've just not done it in pairs because it bothers me that I don't have two Bachmann 20s in the same livery. And that's interesting because obviously the ploughs themselves aren't particularly heavy loads, but the force of the snow is obviously non-trivial. So 2 locos were required, and you can get a sense of how much force is involved by looking at the massive weights that are packed on top of the Beilhack vehicles, and obviously that was needed to keep them stable. So the force required to shift the snow from the tracks, I suppose the deeper the snow, the more force it is quite considerable. So fascinating vehicles, always loved these Beilhacks. And what a fascinating model to own and run on a model railway. It's just what the hobby's all about, isn't it? Adding interest. And these do that perfectly. So that's it, the beautiful Hatton's Beilhacks, starring the Stratford Shark. The next model is one that I did have, but I let one of my friends have it because they needed it more than I did. But it's another unusual model, and I will show you some of my footage of it. It is the RHTT, or the Railhead Treatment Train. And the level of detail on this pack was just crazy. In fact, it was quite fragile because of how detailed it was. But like I say, it was another unusual piece of rolling stock. The base model, I believe, was an intermodal wagon, which Hatton's also produced. And again, they were really high quality, made almost entirely out of metal, and with tons of small separate details fitted to them. I also can't make this video without mentioning the Hatton's Class 66, which I think is one of their better known models. And I think it's probably fair to say that this won't go down as one of their best received models, because I do know that while some of them were fine, quite a few people had a lot of problems with theirs. Now obviously this was unacceptable, and Hatton's sorted people out who were in a mess with it. But it is sad because the example that I looked at was a production sample, I believe, and that had been built properly, and that showed what an incredible model the Hatton's Class 66 was. The detail was incredible, the quality on mine was good, I had the axle boxes dropping out, but that was the only issue really. And the future of lots of Hatton's models is currently unknown, but the Class 66 is going to be given another lease of life under Accurascale, who are upgrading the model, hopefully fixing some of the issues so that it can shine. So the Hatton's Class 66 is far from gone, and it's a model that we can hope to see again in the future. Before we finish then, there is one more Hatton's Originals model that I want to talk about, and it's one that never actually made it to market. But back in 2018, Hatton's announced this, the Placer 12-ton crane. And as you can tell, this would have been yet another unusual model in Hatton's arsenal. And the CADs showed some fantastic details as well. The model was cancelled though in October 2020, about 2 years later. And the reason that Hatton's gave was that pre-order sales were just not that great. So they scrapped it. And we know that some design work was done because we can see those CADs, but whether this project will ever turn up under a different manufacturer, nobody knows. But anyway, that was my little tribute to some of the models that Hatton's produced over the years. A great variety, as you could see, and they're all similar in that the quality and attention to detail are just amazing. So these models are yet another thing that I will miss from Hatton's, and I really do hope that we haven't seen the last of some of those models, particularly the steam locos. I'd love to see some more of those come to fruition. But what are your favourite Hatton's Originals models? Did you partake in some? And if you missed out, which ones would you like to buy? Which ones are you hoping to see crop up from other manufacturers? Well, let me know down in the comments. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Hatton's for bringing us some of these incredible models, some of the best in the industry, really. Again, particularly where those steam locos are concerned. I've always really enjoyed them. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. All right, cheers, folks.